This is part 2 of Dr. Olixn Adams' series on Prana, the essence of health and vitality. Our speaker is Dr. Olixn Adams. Olixn is a board-certified practitioner of family medicine, and he practices holistic medicine at Southern Coos Hospital in Bandon, Oregon. Dr. Adams synthesizes the principles of Ayurvedic medicine and osteopathic medicine to provide a deeper understanding of physiology, spirituality, and the wholeness of life as it pertains to health, healing, and well-being. He's a faculty member of the Biodynamics of Osteopathy program and lectures internationally, teaching osteopathic medicine to physicians from around the world. He has also, in addition to all of this, taken on the role of director at the Pranada Wellness Center, which is a holistic healing center located at the Temple of Compassion in Burton, Texas. This talk is an offering of the Pranada Wellness Center. And Pranada Wellness, it's in its beginning stages. And so currently we are offering educational talks like this one, as well as an annual week-long healing immersion, which is held every spring at the Temple of Compassion. Our next spring retreat will be held March 15th through the 20th of 2025. And I'll go ahead and post in the chat a link to where you can learn more about that offering and sign up for it if you feel called. We'll also have a question and answer session after Olixn's talk where you can ask any questions you have about what happens at the retreats. And there are a few spots left, but they're going to be filling up fast. So I really encourage anyone who's on the fence to take a look at it and think about signing up soon. So again, thank you all for being here. Thank you so much, Olixn, for sharing the wisdom that you bring, and I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you, Rosa. Let's take a moment and close our eyes and start with a prayer this morning. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahi Tejasvi Nama Vishamastu Ma Vidvishavahi. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Good morning, everyone, or good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be at this time. It's nice to spend some time with you again. Our last talk, last month in October, we started a topic on prana. And today we're going to continue this topic and go into more aspects of the talk, of the topic of prana. Last time we discussed the 5 major and the 5 minor pranas. We discussed what prana is and different ways of thinking of what prana is. We said one of the expressions in the Upanishads, it says, praniti javiti bukalam iti pranaha, which means that which helps this body remain for a long period of time is prana, or vital life force. We took a look at what Swami Vivekananda says about prana, and he says, whatever moves, whatever is seen, manifests in this universe is an effect of prana. Prana is that which causes breath and is the vitality of breath. So we talked about sometimes there's a translation of prana as being breath, and that's not quite a full understanding of the translation of prana. We're saying prana is the cause of the breath and the vitality within the breath. Then in the Parasha Upanishad, it says, knowing the origin, dependence, location, divinity, and spirituality of prana, one can attain immortality. So prana is really a beautiful topic and an essential topic when we think about healing and disease. There's no illness that doesn't involve prana. There's no healing that doesn't involve prana. Everything is breathing. Everything has its own unique vibration, its own breath, its own movement. So every organ emits its own unique vibration, its own sound, its own light. And disease then is a derangement from this normal movement or this normal vibration that would inherently be expressed. So in osteopathic medicine, we're trained to use our hands to diagnose illness and to treat illness with the hands. That is through the prana, through understanding that each of the dhatus, each of the 7 tissues have their own unique vibration, their own way of breathing and expressing, and recognizing normal and abnormal vibration, normal and abnormal movement, and restoring the normal motion is part of the journey to healing, part of the process of healing. And this is some of what we do in the Pranada wellness retreats and wellness programs with the different therapies that are used. Rosa gave a beautiful talk a couple of months ago about some of the beautiful modalities in Ayurvedic medicine, and we use some of those in the Pranada programs along with osteopathic medicine because these 2 modalities work very well together. They're synergistic, and they each bring their own understanding and their own support to the prana. So everything we do in life is because of prana and in support of prana. Knowingly or unknowingly, every action we undertake is seeking to nourish our prana or satisfy the pranas. So if we can undertake each action, each breath, which also is an action, as a worship of prana, we'll be supporting the prana and enhancing our health and enhancing our relationship and our communication with the prana. Mahaprana, the breath of life, the great prana, is always supporting us. If it were to stop for even an instant, the entire cosmos would perish. So it's always flowing, it's always working to support us and to help us. So we could ask, well, how can we support the breath of life then? How do we worship the breath of life in each moment? How do we support this prana that's doing so much work to maintain our existence at every level? Because the breath of life is passing through every level of life, and so it is with our own breath, our own thoracic respiration. It's connecting all the levels of life. So we could ask if we're looking to enhance our health or deepen our spiritual practice or deepen our relationship with the universe, how do we support this movement in the breath of life? How do we cooperate with it? How do we synchronize with it? And we'll talk a little bit about that today. Lahiri Maharshi, in a book that he made a commentary on, the Charaka Gita, the book of medicine and mystical healing, he says the after effect poise of Kriya Pranayama is a certain and wonderful medicine. So he's pointing us to this relationship with prana, the effect of pranayama, and the effect of breath on our health. And in our last discussion, we spent quite a bit of time talking about breath and the merging of the breath as apana and prana become one, how they become one. We talked about that in some detail. So today we're going to talk a little bit about how we get synchronized with the prana in day-to-day life. Because prana is also not only bringing the movement, not only bringing the creation, but it's also bringing the tempo of life. And so being synchronized with the breath of life and the tempo that it's expressing in the moment will facilitate a lot of things. It will facilitate a deeper health. It'll facilitate a deeper joy, and it will put us in synchronization with the whole of life. We notice day to day, there's different tempos in life, hour to hour, there's different tempos. And this can even be expressed and seen if you study Jyotisha or Vedic astrology. We see that the different cycles of each of the planets called the Mahadosha, the Maha cycles, each one has a different tempo. There's cycles that are fast, cycles that are slow, and you can recognize through your astrological chart what type of cycle you're in. Are you in a fast cycle, which the tempo of life is much more rapid? Or are you in a slower cycle where things move slowly and take time to maturate and to express and to change? But we can also recognize it just in our day-to-day life by synchronizing with the breath of life. Synchronizing with the Mahaprana will automatically put us in the proper tempo for the service that we're undertaking in the moment. All of life is service. The prana is serving us and we're serving prana. All of life is service. And to be in sync with the tempo of that service will only enhance the service and make it more enjoyable, and will also conserve your own prana, because it's the prana that's really moving through us. It's the prana that's doing the work. When we think that I'm the doer of the work, we will desynchronize with the movement of life. We'll start to use a certain willpower that's not needed. And this will expend a great deal of prana and will tire us out. We see some of these great saints, sages, and mystics and the tremendous service that they offer to humanity. And it's tireless. It seems as if they are never tired. They're in sync with this movement of the prana. They're in synchronization with the movement of life. It's moving through them, and it's allowing them to participate and to be of service in life at a much greater level. So some of the things that can help us synchronize with the movement of life, with the Mahaprana in our day-to-day life, there's four. We'll see how much time we have to talk about each one, but the first one is breath. The second one is listening. The third one is what we're going to call the pause. And the fourth one is an interchange between any two functions in life, and we call it a balanced rhythmic interchange in osteopathic medicine. You'll see it with other terms in different spiritual traditions, but it's a movement of the life force between any two functions. We'll talk about this. So the breath, we're not going to talk about too much today because we spent most of our last conversation talking about the breath and how to synchronize with the breath in a natural, normal breath, what that looks like, what that feels like. So let's talk a little bit about listening and how listening supports an understanding of everything, how listening supports our synchronization with life itself. So we know that every sense is connected to one of the five elements, right? So we have listening that's connected to the ether, and we have touch that's connected to air, And we have sight that's connected to fire. We have taste that's connected to water, and smell that is connected to the earth element. So it's going from subtle to gross. And then the return, this is the prana, as the prana is flowing out. Now, as the prana is bringing the information back in to the observer, it returns from gross to subtle. So this is a scientific fact. It's easy to validate. If you go into, anytime you enter a room or a new space, you can notice what is the first sense that is activated, or the first sense experience in any new situation, in any new room. If you notice, it's the sense of smell. When you walk into a room, the first thing that's really noticed is the smell. And that's connected to the earth element. Then it goes in reverse order. So by the time it gets to the most subtle, we're to the sense of listening and sound. So if we listen to something, if we listen to anything we want to understand, and we're talking about a listening that involves the totality of who we are. So it's not just the ears, it's listening with the eyes, it's listening with the nose, it's listening with the felt sense, or the sense of touch. So the whole of your body, your whole pranic body is absorbing information and receiving information all the time. We have three bodies. That's well known, that we have a physical or gross body, a subtle astral body, which is the prana, is a large part of that, and then the causal body. So this pranic body is receiving information all the time, and it's a subtle information, and it's a much more complete information, a much more complete knowledge, a much more complete wisdom than if we were to isolate any one of the senses or experience any of the senses in isolation. So when we listen with the totality of who we are, with the wholeness of who we are, if we listen with all of our senses at once, we get what's called the sixth sense. It's a much deeper level of understanding. And with that listening will come the visual, the kinesthetic, the sound, even the smell, and possibly even the taste. You can actually get a sense of what your food is going to taste like just by listening to it. You can get a sense of what an herb might taste like by listening. If you want to understand anything, listen to it. Listen. Listen is the most subtle of the senses. You know, we can offend people, we can do harm just by how we look at people. We can do harm by the words that we say or how we touch. But listening, I've never heard of anybody have their feelings hurt by somebody listening to them, right? Because it's that subtle, it's that precious. That's the essence of listening, is the totality of something. So I sometimes listen to the most unusual things. I've sometimes listened to my breakfast, and I gain a much more deeper appreciation of my breakfast. You know, listening to my oatmeal, I start to get a sense of the love of the farmer that grew the oats, and the transportation, the driver who drove the oats to the store. And there's this whole community that is involved in this oatmeal, right? Just a bowl of oatmeal. Now, I wouldn't appreciate that if I was just tasting the oatmeal or just looking at the oatmeal. But if I listen to it with the totality of who I am, a much, much deeper understanding of anything you want to understand, you listen. So if we stop and listen to the prana, even the mahaprana, as the breath of life passes through us, it creates a sound. And in Kriya Yoga, that's known as the Om sound. And it's always available to us to appreciate and to listen to. And listening to that Om sound, we can get Om Samadhi and obtain a sense of peace and a sense of well-being. And this actually is connecting us to the breath of life on all the levels. And from there, we start to get a sense of the tempo that the breath of life is bringing us in the moment. We will have a sense of when it's time to move, when it's time to stop, when it's time to rest. And when we're undertaking any activity, this breath of life gives us the tempo of that activity, right? So, as a physician, I work in many different types of environments, and each environment requires a different tempo, a different pace in the name of service. So if I'm in the emergency room and somebody's bleeding or some other type of emergency is going on, the tempo that is required is quite fast, right? If, on the other hand, I'm supporting a patient who's dying, it's a hospice care, the tempo of the speech, the tempo of my attention is much, 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 much slower. And each patient, each person has their own tempo in their healing. Healing, we say, is a movement to wholeness. So our journey back into wholeness, which is always part of who we are, but our perceptual movement into who we really are in wholeness has a tempo. Sometimes that tempo is fast, and sometimes the tempo is slower. But when we're synchronized with the tempo that's being given in the moment, it adds a potency to whatever it is that we're doing. It brings a greater vitality, a greater potency, and a greater capacity for everything. So this tempo is really, really important. The tempo of life and being synchronized with the tempo of life is one of the keys to health and vitality. And one of the ways that we honor the breath of life and synchronize with the breath of life. And what we're suggesting is listening to anything, especially the divine Om sound as it's passing through us, is one of the easiest and most potent ways to synchronize with the breath of life and the tempo and potency in the moment. Anything you want to understand, listen to it. Be it an herb, your food, a family member, your pet, the air, the sunshine, water, anything you listen to with a deep concentration of listening, you'll have a deeper understanding of what the nature of what you're listening to is. So Dr. Still, who is the founder of osteopathic medicine, which is my tradition, and I've spent a lot of time studying and teaching, it's said that he spent a great deal of time listening to all the different parts of the human body, and that's how he came to so much understanding of their normal function. And he was hundreds of years ahead of his time. The things that he was writing about, expressing and sharing of the nature of the human organism and the nature of healing, he was light years ahead of his time. And it's said that he spent a lot of time listening. He listened to the liver. He listened to the third ventricle. He listened to all the seven dhatus, the seven tissues. So he listened to the blood. And he understood what a normal rasa dhatu, what a normal blood tissue sounds like, what it feels like, and what its function is. And then understood what the abnormal sounded like. So he could recognize early states of disease by recognizing when the light, sound, and vibration of each of those tissues or organs was out of balance or out of sync with the whole. So he advanced the whole science of osteopathic medicine in part by listening. And that was a big part of uh, how he discovered many things that are being validated now today, 1 and 200 years later. We might make the same conclusion that it's part of how the ancient Ayurvedic physicians had so much knowledge and wisdom, even 7,000 years ago. They were aware of things that we're just now starting to discover with the use of MRIs, CT scans, and microscopes that weren't available to our knowledge 7,000 years ago. So somehow they had access to a much deeper understanding, a deeper reality to the essence of anything. And part of that comes from listening. So we said there's a few things that we're going to talk about to support our synchronization with the breath of life and the tempo of life. We said breath, listening. Another one is the pause. Pauses are really a lot of fun, and they're essential to life. If you appreciate music, music is built around the pause. If there's no pause between notes, the notes would not make any sense. It's the pause that gives the meaning to the music. And it's the same thing with speech and speaking. It's the pause between the words that brings the meaning to the language or the words. Without the pause, it would just be a string of sounds that would have no sense or no meaning. So some of what we actually listen to is the pauses. When a patient's telling me their story, which is a sacred story, when they're giving us their history, part of what we're listening to is the pauses as much as the words, because there's a certain meaning, a certain truth that comes through the pause that's not available in the word itself. So we can connect pauses and listening. It's not just listening, but when somebody is speaking to you, listening to the pause between the words as much as the words itself, and an image will come and reveal a deeper meaning of what's being expressed. Then we have pauses in the natural world, and we have pauses in our day-to-day life. So at sunrise and sunset, there's a pause in the whole natural world. If you ever spend any time in nature, if you're walking in nature near sunrise or sunset, everything pauses. You can appreciate it, especially in the summertime when the crickets are going or the circadians, the birds. Right around sunset, right around sunrise, they all stop. Everything stops and it becomes still and quiet. And this is a pause. And if we stop with that and pause, we're synchronized with the natural world. And in these pauses, there is a balancing and a synchronization with the prana. So the five major pranas and the five minor pranas will synchronize with Mahaprana, or the breath of life, in these pauses. They'll resynchronize, because as we're going through our day-to-day life, especially in the modern world, and if you're working or involved in service or any type of activity, there's a capacity for the different pranas to get desynchronized, and that's okay. It's a normal effect of a busy life. So these pauses are built in to nature as part of a reset. And they happen throughout the day. But the two big ones that are easy to notice is sunrise and sunset. If you can appreciate that pause and pause, just stop doing what you're doing for a few moments, that will allow the five pranas to resynchronize. It'll allow all of the seven tissues, the seven dhatus, to resynchronize with their fulcrum of life, which is love, which is the breath of life. So there's a resynchronization with all the physiological functions with their source, with their origin in these pauses. When we're giving an osteopathic treatment, we have to be very attentive to these pauses because these pauses arise and it's the opportunity for the patient to resynchronize, rebalance before the breath of life takes the next step in the healing, before it brings the next therapeutic force, the next therapeutic event. So these pauses are very important. We have pauses also just in daily life, but we tend to ignore them. We tend to find them as an inconvenience. So, when you're driving your car, if you come to a red light, that's a pause in the man-made world, but it is a pause. And it's an opportunity to stop and listen and appreciate our breath, appreciate the divine sound. There's pauses in the grocery store. There's pauses in the bank. There's all these pauses. But technology has kind of overrun some of these pauses, because you notice we get in line at the grocery store and the first thing we do, rather than appreciate the pause, we reach for our cell phone, right? You see a lot of people in line, first thing they do, they pull out the cell phone, they start scrolling and you're missing the pause. You're missing the pause. And sometimes the breath of life really wants us to have a pause when we least expect it. And if we can really appreciate it and absorb that pause, it's very powerful for our consciousness. A tremendous amount of rest can happen in a 1 to 5 minute pause if we can embrace it. There was one time I went into the grocery store and I was in a hurry, so I wasn't synchronized with the breath of life. I had my own agenda of how fast things should go. And I got the two items I needed. And so then I went and I was scanning the cashiers. There was 4 cashiers, and I was seeing which one I thought was going to be the fastest one to get through, right? Because I'm already desynchronized with the breath of life. So I picked the one. I was one person that had one item. And I'm like, that's going to be a fast one, right? Well, the breath of life had a different plan and a different agenda for me. So I get in that line. It turned out to be the longest pause because the person was trying to return this one item and they were having tremendous trouble returning this one item. And I'm watching all the other lines, like 5, 6, 7 people got to go through. And I'm stuck behind one person in this line. And I'm getting more and more impatient and like, come on. And then I remembered, oh, yeah, this is a pause. And I felt the pause. And I was like, okay, the breath of life is trying to resynchronize me with life. I was in such a hurry to get in and out of the store, to get to where I was going, that I was completely desynchronized. So the breath of life just imposed a pause right there. Boom, you picked the wrong line. Well, it was actually the right line. But I got in this line and this pause then descends upon me and it reorganizes my whole perception. That's what the pause will do. So now all of a sudden, where there was impatience, there's patience. Where there was judgment, there's love. Where there was resentment, there's acceptance. Where the blood pressure was probably starting to go up, it was probably now coming down. There's all these physiological changes that start to happen because the pause, when we acknowledge it and accept it and embrace it, we are in relationship with the breath of life in one of its manifestations, one of its expressions. The breath of life is always flowing. It's always moving at one level. But as we descend into creation and participate in the natural world, the breath of life expresses in many different ways. So it's a polyrhythmic system. It's a symphony. We're living in a symphony. We're living in an ocean of prana. And at different levels of the ocean, there's different currents and there's different expressions. So we want to try to understand some of these expressions and some of these different currents. And we want to be in synchronization with these expressions and currents. That is a worship of prana. That is a worship of your true self. It's a relationship with your true self that will make you happy and bring you peace. And you might just get a little healthier along the way. So this relationship with the breath of life is the essence of life. And we have to be synchronized with the tempo and the pace that it's bringing. And one of the ways is listening. Another way is acknowledging the pauses as they arise. And we might have to put away our cell phone to do that, because if we get in a pause and we just override the pause on the cell phone, you're going to miss the whole effect that the pause is trying to bring you. I mean, you might miss a miracle at a red light, you know? You might miss a miracle in the grocery store because you're playing on your cell phone. And if we can just acknowledge the pause, the breath of life then can pass through and do its work. It's always passing through, but it can't always do its work because we're not acknowledging the pause. We're not neutral enough to receive that level of love, which is always there. But the pause brings the neutrality to receive that perfect love with each breath. Yeah. So that's a little bit about listening, a little bit about the pauses. Then we have another aspect that supports us to be in greater harmony and relationship with the breath of life. And that's a special movement. There's a special movement between all the aspects of life, all the diversity, which is really one. So we have the breath of life, which is one, passing through everything, creating, sustaining, and destroying the entire cosmos, the entire creation now has a diversity, a multiplicity with a oneness that's holding all of it. Well, between all of these functions, between all of this diversity, there's a flow of prana, there's a movement of prana. And anytime any two people, for example, are together, if they can acknowledge a common love, it could be anything. It could be meditation, it could be nature, it could be a sport. Anytime there's a common love and two people together, there's a movement of prana that moves almost like a figure eight. So you have that, what is loved, as the fulcrum, and then you have the two functions, and you have the prana moves around and through like a figure of eight. And that's called a balanced rhythmic interchange. It's called balanced because it's balanced, rhythmic because it has a rhythmic movement that's perfect for that moment, and an interchange because it's an interchange of prana between the two functions. This happens in our physiology. This happens in the inner world and the outer world. And so if two people are discussing something that they love, there'll be this balanced rhythmic interchange. And out of that will come a third possibility that was not possible with just the one function. So that's what is called understanding. When we discuss something together with love, we both gain a deeper understanding about what is being discussed. And that's called a balanced rhythmic interchange. So there's this movement of the prana flowing from the fulcrum of love between the two functions. And out of that love then expresses a completely new function. It could be a new idea. It could be a new function. It could be a new activity. It could be a new understanding. And this occurs between a teacher and a student. This occurs between a guru and a disciple. It occurs between a master and a disciple. It can occur anywhere. It can occur between a animal and a human, between a plant and a human. If you're out in nature and you're walking and you're open to this possibility and synchronize with the breath of life through the pauses, and you stop and listen to a tree or listen to the river, a balanced rhythmic interchange will occur. And first off, it's healing. It's healing to the human organism, the human heart, and the human mind. It's healing because it puts us in touch with a deeper sense of wholeness. And we will experience a deeper relationship with that which we're listening to through this balanced rhythmic interchange. And we'll experience a deeper understanding and an exchange of the prana that's always flowing. Now it's flowing around a common fulcrum that we call love. And really, we can't have an understanding of another person without that. That's partly why there's so much misunderstanding in the world today is we're going at such a fast pace, we're desynchronized, we're not listening, we're missing the pauses, and now there's no opportunity for this balanced rhythmic interchange, which is what allows for the understanding to emerge. It emerges out of a balanced rhythmic interchange. So there's a balanced rhythmic interchange that occurs in our physiology as well. You know, when we take an herb for a healing or a therapeutic reason, that herb, the prana of that herb has a balanced rhythmic interchange with all of the different tissues, all the different dhatus in the system. And certain herbs have a certain affinity for certain tissues. So those herbs then will go in and there'll be a balanced rhythmic interchange of the prana, and the prana in that tissue then gets regulated and changes its relationship to the breath of life. It changes its vibration. It changes its cellular wisdom. It changes its constitution is changed through this balanced rhythmic interchange. So this balanced rhythmic interchange is really important aspect of healing. And it's present on the inside and on the outside. And as we practice the outside manifestation, it enhances the inner manifestation. So balanced rhythmic interchange is also part of the digestive process. So if you want to improve your digestive strength, you can practice balanced rhythmic interchange on the outer world by listening to the trees, listening to the sunshine, listening to the air, and allowing all of these things of the natural world to establish a balanced rhythmic interchange through our whole being. This will bring a tremendous vitality. That's partly why people like to spend time in nature, just walking in nature and relaxing and being present in that moment to what's there in the natural world naturally sets up pauses and balanced rhythmic interchange, which is really important. It's the flow of the prana. And it flows in a really beautiful way. You can feel it. You'll feel it pass through, out through this fulcrum of love, around and back through you. Prana feeding prana, balanced rhythmic interchange. It's quite extraordinary. And it's free. It won't cost you anything. And it's very powerful for your health. It will enhance your health. It'll enhance your understanding of what we're listening to. So those are some of the ways. If you have any questions, please send them on to Rosa. She'll in a few minutes we'll see if anybody has any questions. Um, so those are some of the maybe four of the main ways that we can use to enhance our relationship with the breath of life, Mahaprana, come into a deeper relationship with this. So we have breath, listening, pauses, and balanced rhythmic interchange. Last time, we're not going to talk about breath too much today because we spent most of the last hour, last discussion was on breath. But also, one thing that I will mention with the breath is there's a pause in your breath, right? And so between each inhalation and exhalation, there's a pause. And if we can appreciate that pause, it will take us into a deeper relationship with the breath. It will also synchronize us with the breath of life, and it will synchronize us with the natural pauses in the world, in the natural world and in the man-made world. So in our daily life, there are these pauses. If we can attune ourselves to them, the prana just kind of comes to a pause. It just sort of stops. And if we're sensitive to this, which everyone can be, you're made to feel these things. This isn't some super highly mystical realm. It's part of the natural world, actually. It's part of your natural state. We've just kind of become desensitized to it with the active, restless mind and a culture that's moving very quickly and a technology that's kind of forcing us to move quickly and a little bit desensitizing us to the more subtle aspect of our bodies, the more subtle body. But it's really our natural state. If you start to just practice it a little bit, you'll feel when, yeah, okay, the prana is not quite moving in the same way right now because I just don't have any impetus to get up and move. I just kind of want to sit here. That's not tamasic, right? That is actually sattvic. If you're synchronized with the breath of life and you don't feel an impetus to move, that's not tamasic, it's sattvic. If you move when it's not time to move, it's rajasic. So you're sitting there and you're at peace and you just feel like it's just, I need to get up and go to the bank, but it's just not quite time yet. I need to get up and go to the store. It's just not quite time. And then you feel it. It just moves. All of a sudden it's really easy. It's almost like you're floating. It just becomes really easy to move. And then all of a sudden it's like our feet start to feel a little heavy and our movements start to feel like we're, moving in quicksand. Well, maybe just stop and listen. Maybe it's a pause. And sometimes just acknowledging the pause for even 30 seconds or a minute will resynchronize you. And then all of a sudden, the activity that needs to be done gets a lot easier. Sometimes I practice that even, in a daily practice in the clinic or in the hospital. It can be really busy and you can get behind the schedule. What the man-made schedule says it's time for the next patient. If I ignore the pause and push through that, I'm going to get further behind. I'm going to get more tired. It's not going to go well. Even though I'm, technically 5 minutes behind by the man-made schedule, I might be right on time by the breath of life. And so then I pause, sometimes just 30 seconds or a minute, the whole thing gets reset. And then the whole flow of the day, the whole flow of the next appointment just seems to go much, much better. So these are things that we've tested in clinical practice in many different environments in terms of just the flow of life, but also in terms of people's healing, health, and well-being. We've tested these principles for many years in clinical practice. in clinics and hospitals, emergency rooms, birthing suites, nursing homes, people's homes, the natural world, daily life. We've been testing and studying these principles for many, many, many years, and we can trace many of these principles back in the Vedic literature, thousands of years. So these are time-tested scientific principles to support your relationship with life and to support your health, your digestion, your perception, and support all aspects of health, which is a balanced dosha and a balanced senses, a balanced elimination, strong digestion. These are all the hallmarks of health, and these are all enhanced as we increase our relationship with prana, which is the true healer. Prana is the true healer. There's no healing that doesn't involve prana. Any good healing system, whether they know it or not, is going to have an effect on the prana. And the prana, the breath of life, is always there. It's right next to us. It's closer than our own breath. Our own breath is the breath of life, right there. So, Rosa, do we have any questions?
Yes, and that's a good segue to our first question, which is, do you recommend pranayama or just to watch breath naturally?
Yeah, that's a very beautiful and good question. And we talked a lot about that on the last talk. You could go back and listen to that. And what we said was the natural breath is the foundation for any pranayama. And the natural breath, we talked a lot about the movements that happen in the subtle body. And the pause is the doorway to the natural breath. So as we just watch the breath without trying to change it, and we can notice as we're breathing in, there's what we call a stop point somewhere around the diaphragm. So a normal breath when we breathe in would go all the way to the toes. You'd feel it go all the way to the toes. It actually goes in two directions because you have apana and prana are both involved in a normal breath. So as we breathe in, we feel the prana, we feel the air, we feel all of this. Actually, in normal breath, we feel it going in two directions. So we feel the breath from the fontanelle to the toes. That's a very neutral breath that most of us don't have in day-to-day life. As we get under stress, the vata dosha gets increased. And this is like a bioelectric force that has to then get deposited somewhere. And it tends to deposit in the empty spaces. One of the big empty spaces that it's very easy for it to deposit into is a seam between the diaphragm and the lungs. There's actually an empty, a little bit of potential space in there. So you get this bioelectric force across the seam of the diaphragm, and it prevents the breath from actually going down. So when we breathe in, it feels like our breath is getting stopped at the diaphragm. Or if we're under more stress, it feels like it's getting stopped even higher. So we've talked about watching the breath and just noticing where that stop point is and not trying to change it, but just observe it and then appreciate the pause between each breath without trying to change it and just watching the breath. And that breath then will start to change. And as it starts to move, then it feels like that stop point then is moving lower and lower into the abdomen. We're starting to now get a more natural breath that's easier to observe and watch. And that then becomes our foundation for any pranayama. We go into more detail on it on the last talk if you want to hear a little bit more about that. And that comes out of the teaching from the Bhagavad Gita that tells us that some yogis offer apana to prana and some offer prana to apana. So the inner prana to the outer prana to the inner prana, they become one. They become one breath. And that's a natural breath. In osteopathy, we call it the embryonic breath. Um, but anyways, that's a very good question. And yes, I would say just starting with just observing the breath until your breath feels like it's harmonized, easy, natural, synchronized. Then from there, all the pranayamas are much easier to take, to observe and to practice any of the pranayamas that you might choose to practice.
Beautiful. Thank you, Olixn. And anybody who's interested in watching the part one of this talk, it's been posted in the chat, a link. This talk will also be recorded, and so you can watch it later. Feel free to share it with anyone you think might be interested. The second question that came through is about tinnitus. And this person asks if you have any advice for a listening practice for somebody who has tinnitus, who might have be having some problem with the listening channel.
Yeah, so tinnitus then is a uh, usually excess of vata dosha in the nerve for the listening, the eighth cranial nerve. And one thing that can be done is warm sesame oil in the ears, and then putting cotton ball and allow that oil to absorb into the ears and to help pacify the vata dosha. Also, the supernasya nose drops into the nose are beneficial for pacifying the excess vata that may be in the head, in the ears, and the neck. Anything that pacifies vata dosha. The other place that we'll see excess of vata that will cause tinnitus is in the rasa dhatu, in the blood. When you get excess of it, for some reason, it causes tinnitus. So we want to nourish the blood. And there's different ways you can get with an Ayurvedic practitioner to help with that aspect, because that's a little bit more technical than we would want to go into right now as a general discussion. Then we want to also discern, is it the divine Om sound or is it tinnitus? Right? And that question comes frequently, especially, I see a lot of yogis and yoginis and sages and different people. So is it tinnitus or is it divine Om sound? Well, we said as the breath of life passes through us, it creates a sound, and that's the cosmic Om sound. And it could be a humming sound, it could be a higher pitched sound, it could be a whistling sound, it could be a sound like wind, it could sound like angels singing. It can have many, many different sounds. What distinguishes tinnitus from the divine Om sound is the effect it has on our consciousness when we listen to it. Okay. So listening to divine Om sound brings a sense of peace and harmony, and will allow the mind to become more focused and more singular. It'll enhance the meditation, and it may often start to accompany a vibration in all of the dhatus. So all of the dhatus, as we listen to that sound, are now synchronizing with that sound. They start to vibrate, they start to hum, and we start to get this vibration along with the sound. So as we listen to the sound, then we might get light, sound, and vibration as one effect or one event. Tinnitus tends to not have that type of effect upon us if it's tinnitus and we're listening to it. But if you do have tinnitus and you do give your ears a break by putting some earplugs in at different times, perhaps when you go to sleep, or for a half an hour during the day, put some earplugs in and just let the ears have a rest. That's helpful for tinnitus. So for tinnitus, we like sesame oil in the ears. We like nasya drops in the nose. Um, Maybe dashamula oil on the feet and legs to help with the grounding. And we're trying to bring the prana down into the feet. It's too much prana in the head sometimes, and the vata dosha is out of balance. And these imbalances will express in the eighth cranial nerve. They'll express in different areas of the head, and they'll express, it'll express in the blood. I've seen if we balance the rasa dhatu, the tinnitus will improve as well. It's also good to have your ears checked by a doctor. They should look in the ears, make sure there's not too much earwax or different things. One time, a mom brought a child to me in the emergency room. They said he was having tinnitus, and when we looked in the ear, there was a bug in his ear stuck in the earwax. So we had to get the bug out of the ear to cure the tinnitus, right? So you should have somebody look in the ears, make sure there's not too much earwax, and possibly a hearing exam. There's other uh, manifestations that can cause tinnitus at the gross tissue level that should be checked out if it's really problematic. Beyond that, it's a pacification of the vata dosha for tinnitus. And then making sure we're not dealing with divine Om sound and misdiagnosing it as tinnitus. Yeah. Good question. Thank you.
Yolene, do you have time for a few more?
Yeah.
Okay. So our next question is about different types of pranayama for different imbalances. This person says they're dealing with edema and has found cell salts that work, but is interested in if there's certain types of breath practices, pranayama, for dealing with edema and different imbalances.
Yeah, there's many different kinds of pranayamas. Each one has its own special effect on each of the pranas. Um, Dr. Lad has a very beautiful instructional video on pranayamas. I would suggest maybe take a look at that because he goes through all of the major pranayamas and the balancing effect it has on the physiology. And also, again, as a reminder, we already mentioned this, but making sure that you have a balanced breath as your foundation before starting pranayamas. I think that's really important. Just a normal, natural breath is really important. If your breath is desynchronized or out of balance, it's much more difficult to practice the pranayamas. So observing a normal, natural breath and just allowing the breath to synchronize by listening to the pauses of the breath and just observing the breath with neutrality and with love is a starting place of pranayama, in my opinion, of just observing the breath without trying to change it. It will change on its own because you're bringing the observation with love and acknowledging that the breath is a manifestation of your own divinity. The breath is a manifestation of the breath of life in your physical form. And it is love itself, and it's passing through all the levels of life. And if you acknowledge this and appreciate this and just watch the breath with love and gratitude, each breath is unique. Each breath has its own shape. Each breath has its own tempo. And just observe it with a little neutrality. Within 5 to 10 minutes, your breath will be resynchronized and harmonized. Once you feel that normal breath, then the pranayamas can be practiced. And I would direct her to that video of Dr. Lad's because I think he does a really beautiful job in explaining and teaching those.
Thank
And
you.
I think Rosa placed a link for it.
I did. I just put that in the
Yeah.
chat. Um, yeah, and if you are interested in having a consultation with Olixn, there was a comment about that. I really encourage you to think about making the time and space to come to the spring retreat. It's probably the best opportunity um, to receive a consultation from Olixn or one of our other amazing osteopathic physicians. Um, is that correct, Olixn? That's currently the best.
Yes, that'd be a great time.
Okay. Um, One more question. This person is asking, they have a pinched nerve at C7 and scar tissue at the base of the spine. Very flexible, but mobility is restricted, interested in what they can do.
So the Nasya oil in the nose is good for any dysfunction from the clavicles to the top of the head. um, Mahanarayan oil on the neck is very good daily. um, the oil of castor oil is a very good anti-inflammatory. So once or twice a week, you can make a castor oil pack and apply castor oil, and then a warm, wet washcloth, and then a heating pad for 15 or 20 minutes will allow that oil to penetrate deep into the tissues. Castor is a natural steroid, so it has natural anti-inflammatory properties, are some things that may support that. Then if she sends what town she's in, we can see if there's an osteopathic physician in her area who could see her and give treatment or more direct support or care based on the details of what's going on in her system.
Okay, great. She says she's in Vancouver.
Vancouver, Canada?
I believe so.
Yeah, so she could send you or me her email address. I know some very, very good practitioners up there.
Okay, so if you got that, Liz, you can privately message me or Olixn your email address, and we'll try to get that to you. Okay, I think that's the end of our questions. Anybody who has a burning question, please feel free to post that now. And I kind of have a question if I can slip one in.
Please.
Okay, so when you were talking about the tempo, it really got me thinking about heartbeat and heartbeat irregularities. And I don't know if there's any more information or any insight you can give about heartbeat irregularity and prana, that's relationship to prana.
Yeah, so if you spend, the more time you spend desynchronized with the movement of life, the more disruption will come into your personal prana, into the prana, and it can lead to many types of irregularities. Atrial fibrillation is the most common heart irregularity we see in daily practice. There's many causes for atrial fibrillation, but one of the big causes is stress and anxiety. Um, Also, enlarged heart can be caused from a cause of atrial fibrillation, and sleep apnea, hyperthyroid. But we see if you take too many stimulants, like too much coffee or these energy drinks, people will come in with a very fast heart rate. And I've seen that in the emergency room, their heart's going at 130 or 150 beats a minute at rest. They're just sitting there. And it's not even it's not even atrial fibrillation, it's just going fast. And you talk to them, well, they've been drinking 3 or 4 Red Bulls a day. And some of those energy drinks contain 200 to 300 milligrams of caffeine per drink. An average cup of coffee has 80 milligrams. So that's like getting 4 cups of coffee per every energy drink. So I saw a teenager, he was having very rapid heart rate. He'd drinking like 7 energy drinks. And so his system is going so fast. It's the caffeine is a form of prana, and it's telling the prana what to do. So you've ingested something that is making the prana go faster and faster. And now they're getting faster and faster in their life, and they're playing video games and running around and doing this, doing that, faster, faster, faster. So there's a desynchronization. The prana is going fast. The heart just starts to go faster and faster. There's a deep relationship with our heart rate and prana. And that's how, we know of the yogis with the nirvikalpa samadhi, the breathless, pulseless state. The prana has become so still that the breath and the pulse are able to stop for a period of time, but the whole organism is completely receptive to the breath of life that's passing through, bringing the nutritive substance for a period of time. They can go 20 or 30 or 40 minutes without that pulse or that breath because the prana has become so refined and so peaceful and so calm. So yes, if you see people in your practice, Rosa, and the heart rate is a problem, we have to look at the synchronization with the Mahaprana and the harmonization of the prana, all the five pranas in their life. It's very, very much connected. The heart is fascinating. How does it, even they've do heart transplant and take the heart out. It's not connected to anybody, but it's still beating, right? The heart's still beating. So it's responding to a tempo that's being given by the breath of life. It's made to receive that. And then the heart that's in the chest is just a manifestation of our high heart, of the heart of the health, which is our true health, which is our true self, which knows the perfect tempo. It's always in sync. Our true self is always in perfect synchronization with the perfect tempo. It's when we desynchronize from that and stop responding to the true tempo that we get desynchronized. Now, the heart that should be responding to the true heart is having to respond to the tempo that's being defined by the egoic mind. It's going to beat faster. It's going to have to beat faster to keep up. Yeah. Deep connection there.
Thank you so much. Um, Kind of leads into the next question, which is disease the main way to tell we are desynchronized?
Well, disease, any symptom of disease is going to be a later effect of the desynchronization. So, disease, everything is a communication, right? So, prana is constantly communicating with us. So, any symptom we have is simply a communication, and it's communicating an imbalance or a desynchronization. But the desynchronization occurred before the symptom manifested. So the art of Ayurvedic medicine, the art of osteopathic medicine is to pick up those imbalances before they manifest as full symptoms and before they manifest as disease. We should be able to pick those things up earlier, and that's a whole science in Ayurveda is the early signs of any disease process. There's a beautiful science there. One beautiful example is if you get goosebumps when you pee, it's an early warning sign for diabetes, right? And that's how the prana is expressing itself. So all of these different unusual symptoms are early warning signs. And then there's even an early warning sign before that, depending on how sensitive we are in our organism. So these transgressions against the natural movement of the prana is the source of disease. And the original, movement of that is we forget who we are. We forget our true nature. And because we've forgotten who we are, we've lost our sense of peace and we start to look forward externally. And then we start to create habits and behaviors that are not synchronized with the breath of life. And then there'll be early signs and symptoms, then there'll be early symptoms, and then the disease process starts, and then it grows from there. And if you study Ayurveda, they talk about the 5 steps that goes through of the building, and then the spreading, and then the settling. So all these steps. But yes, it starts with a desynchronization. We're not talking about genetic causes right now. We're talking about uh, non-genetic illnesses and diseases. So our path back to healing, our path back to wholeness is getting resynchronized with the prana, with the breath of life that's always there. That's one of the important steps. The herbs, the diet, medications, these all support, but underlying all of that is getting reconnected with the breath of life, which is always there for us. Breath, pause, um, and balanced rhythmic interchange are the tools.
We have a few more questions if you have time.
Okay.
Um, one is kind of a personal question about aortic valve hypertrophy. And I don't know that we can give any recommendations for people in Austin right now, but I did want to bring up that to see if you have any insight about that condition as it relates to prana.
So hypertrophy of the aortic valve means that there's been an increase in its size. Hypertrophy means larger. The aortic valve is the last valve that the blood goes through as it leaves the heart and goes to the rest of the body. So it's a very important valve. And the most important thing is getting the understanding of where the cause is of that. So it can be from hypertension, it can be from sleep apnea, it can be from a rheumatic disease. So you're going to want to get an understanding of the cause, which would require more of a one-on-one consultation. The herb Arjuna is very beneficial for most heart conditions. And so some Arjuna tablets might be a simple place to start, but we're not giving any medical advice during these talks. We're just saying that some people have used Arjuna to support heart health as a starting place, but you're going to need to work with the practitioner to try to fine tune a treatment and a therapy for you and understand the root cause. Yeah.
Thank you. Um, this is sort of a left field question, but I'll ask it. Is there any relationship between people losing objects? This person lost a valuable object or sentimental object, and relationship between lost objects and prana.
Yes, everything is a manifestation of prana. So nothing happens, nothing moves, nothing appears, nothing disappears without the influence of the breath of life. So it's an opportunity for a deeper relationship with the breath of life. And what matters more is your response to the event than what actually occurred. Your response has the potential to bring a deeper relationship to the breath of life. It can be a reminder that the breath of life is the essence of our happiness, the essence of our well-being. And that object then that's lost has attachment to some memory, and recognizing that that memory is probably connected to love, and that love is coming through the breath of life all the time. And that person or that object that was loved is there in your heart all the time, regardless of any external object or circumstance. But the breath of life is creating that event and is behind that event. Any event. Nothing happens without the breath of life. One movement. You feel it when you go into a crowded place, it's really fun to see and appreciate that there's the breath of life is creating all of this motion. You know, you say you go to a crowded train station or a busy emergency room or a busy downtown, you have all these people moving at different tempos and paces and walking and sitting and eating and talking and picking their nose and brushing their hair and scratching and itching, all these different things, tying their shoes. But see if you can feel and get a sense of one movement behind all of that movement, one movement of the breath of life that's creating, holding, and maintaining all this diversity. It's a nice spiritual practice to put you in a sense of wholeness. Now you're not an individual looking at all these other individuals. You're part of the whole. You're part of the wholeness of life. That's what the breath of life gives us, is it reminds us that we are not individuals, but we're part of a whole. We're part of a diversity and wholeness. Any movement you see is coming from the breath of life. Any movement, any manifestation is coming from the breath of life. Even the five elements, even the sun, even the air, the wind, your breath, your pulse is coming from the breath of life. So we want to worship that, understand that, and really start to think about that and appreciate that and feel it in whatever way is available to us in the moment. Even if your symptoms don't get better, you'll be happier. Very good questions. Thank you, everyone.
And there's just one more, if it's okay to do one
Sure.
more question. Um, so, how does being around the Divine Mother cows impact prana? And this person's referring to Brahmin cows, probably specifically the ones that are housed at the Temple of Compassion.
Yeah, so they have a profound impact upon your prana because they're transmitting directly, without any filter, the breath of life as the Divine Mother, and it's a balanced rhythmic interchange that we talked about earlier. So your prana is circulating around the love through their prana, it's circulating. So you get this balanced rhythmic interchange of prana between one function and another function that's really one function. So you have the appearance of two functions that are really one. But these Brahmin cows um, transmit so much undifferentiated prana, breath of life, that just being in their presence, it's like a river pouring through your heart. It's like a river of love. It's like a river of prana is pouring through your heart, and it's healing and transmutating everything it comes in touch with. That's what it does. And these cows are there's so much because it's the breath of life passing through. It's undifferentiated, unobstructed wisdom. So the cow, if it smells your hand or licks you, it knows you're in balance right there. And it will go and eat the right herbs for you. So that herb will go in the milk. And when you drink that milk, it will bring a healing effect to you. But not just that, if you stroke the back where the humps are, it's emanating, that prana, that medicine is emanating off of those humps onto you. So if you go to the cows daily, they're trying to eat the herbs to bring you the healing that is needed for your particular constitution in that particular moment. It's really quite amazing. They're quite extraordinary uh, manifestations of the Divine Mother. And it's a balanced rhythmic interchange. And balanced rhythmic interchange becomes more potent by listening and by acknowledging the pauses. So when you approach the cow, you notice the cows are in perfect harmony with the pauses because they'll see you coming before you're even close. They feel you coming and they'll move sort of closer to where you're moving to, but they don't go all the way. They kind of move and they stop and they pause. So they're allowing everything to adjust to its perfection. And then you get to the edge of the fence and then they move a little closer and they stop and they pause. So they're allowing that balance rhythmic interchange to start having an effect without overwhelming. They're going at the perfect tempo. Then they come all the way to the edge of the fence, or sometimes they come all the way right at once. It depends on the tempo, but they're following the pauses and the tempo. And they get up to the edge of the fence, and then we have an interaction. We have a relationship that involves a balanced rhythmic interchange. So now we want to listen. We want to listen to the cow, deeply listen, because there's going to be a communication. There's going to be an understanding that emerges. It's not available if we're in our rational mind, because we're talking in our mind, even though we're not saying anything, the mind's talking, blah, 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 blah. And it overrides the balanced rhythmic interchange. So we stop, we pause, we listen with the totality of who we are. We try to listen. Then automatically, if you're listening, the mind gets more quiet right away. That's why, one reason that listening to divine sound is part of Kriya Yoga, because as soon as you're listening, mind has to get more quiet. To listen, it has to get more quiet. So now we listen to the cow, and now this balanced rhythmic interchange is going to get really strong. And something's going to flow through you that will bring some type of healing, understanding, relationship, love, all of this. So it's a beautiful medicine. That's part of the medicine that we use at the Pranada Wellness Centers, is because the cows are there. That's part of the medicine. And the ashram is part of the medicine, and the 108 acres is part of the medicine, and the guru's present is part of the medicine. Then the practitioners are just there to facilitate that. The medicine is already there. The breath of life is already passing through that space, because it's a sacred space that doesn't have the distractions, the filters of the busyness of the world. So the prana can express itself at a deeper, stronger therapeutic level. Then we have the community, which is essential for healing. And there's a balanced rhythmic interchange between each individual and every other individual. So there's a communal wisdom that emerges, and a pranic body that holds the whole of the event is there for the duration of the event. So all these principles are there. They're essential, but it comes out of listening. It comes out of love. It comes out of the pauses. These are the essential elements we're talking about today, are the essential elements that the programs that we do. We really talk about this in more detail and try to bring it to light, bring it to the foreground, because if it's in the foreground, it gets stronger, it gets more present, and we start to really feel it and live it. And that is why a community is essential for healing. You don't heal in isolation. You heal in community. If healing is truly a movement to wholeness, then you can't heal in isolation. You have to heal within the context of your community, whatever that is. So we have a community of Kriyavans, we have a community of Pranada Wellness Center. And Pranada means the giver of prana. And that was the name that Guruji chose for the healing center many years ago. And it was chosen for a very special reason. Is the giver of prana. I think there's one more question.
There is one more question, and if you have time.
Yeah, we have 1 minute.
Great. Okay.
We can run a minute late if we need to.
Okay. What are your thoughts on non-commitment and addiction?
Well, addiction, usually you could look at it this way. Everything that we do is a service of prana. So everything we do is to either is an attempt to nourish our prana or satisfy our prana. And so usually if there's an addiction, there could be a physiologic imbalance that's needing to be addressed, or a psychological, emotional imbalance where something is being missed, the sense of love, the sense of wholeness. So most people that have an addiction are seeking a deeper level of balance and a deeper sense of wholeness and a deeper sense of love. And that's, for many different reasons, the means that they came to find that. The core reason, of course, is ignorance, and that's not an insult. We all suffer from ignorance. Nobody knows when ignorance started, but we do know that it can end, and it ends through light and love and understanding. So we have to start with listening to the patient that has an addiction and listening to what's missing, listening to their story, but really it's listening to the pauses in the story and finding a way to support them to feel the breath of life, to feel the love, to feel that they are part of the whole. They never weren't, but there's an illusion that we're not. So usually it's that. And then supporting the physiology to change. And some substances are harder than others to overcome. Um, I knew a patient that was addicted to cigarettes, and you don't have to tell a patient that smoking is bad for them. Everybody knows that. So if you start there, you're not going to go anywhere. So we started with listening to her story of smoking. And so I asked her what brand she smoked, and it was Pall Mall. And I got really curious, why Pall Mall, Pall Mall brand. And it was a particular Pall Mall. I think it was the red, because Pall Mall, I guess, comes in different colors. I didn't know this, but there's different colors. So it was the red. Well, when we got into a little more history, her favorite uncle smoked Pall Mall cigarettes in the red brand. So there was this association between the love and of her uncle and the smoking of the cigarette. When that came to light, then she was ready to quit. And it was 1 month later that she quit. So finding cause, it always comes back to finding cause. The root cause, the root cause is our sense of separation from true self and our loss of who we really are. From there, all the other causes emerge. So you could say all disease has one cause. So for the person who asked the question, we're praying that whoever the question is for, that they can begin to feel a little sense of love, of support, of community, of wholeness that will allow the release of the mind on the craving. And pranayama is a good way to clear the channels of the substance that gets lodged into those channels. Smoking, the nicotine plugs up those subtle nadi channels. Pranayama can help to clear that out. Different substances have an affinity for different tissues and different aspects of the channels, and these substances will plug it up. Some people that are having a hard time with smoking, um, they're feeling too much. They have a hard time receiving love, and it's almost like a barrier to that. It's a smokescreen, literally a smokescreen, and the channels are helping getting clogged. But I think we're about out of time now.
I think we are. So, again, thank you everybody who
Thank you, everyone.
participated in this. Again, if you're interested in the spring retreat, please follow that link in the chat. It's a really good opportunity to get some one-on-one time with Olixn and a whole crew of amazing osteopathic physicians, Ayurvedic practitioners. Our next talk will be by Dr. Christine Mitchell. I believe it's slated for Saturday, December 14th at the same time. There'll be an email going out about that soon. So again, thank you so much, Olixn, for sharing with us
Thank
today.
you, everyone.
So rich.
We'll do a closing prayer. Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamavavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Thank you, everyone.